Hey, what's up? I wanted to chat to you today, talk to you guys about something that has been a very prevalent thing in my life, and that is dealing with sleep and sleep issues to varying degrees. Anyone who knows me knows that I've had some sort of sleep issues. I've never really alluded to just quite how bad they did get, which I'm going to go through in today's episode. And my goal for today's episode, I don't really know what this is yet. Is it a podcast? Is it a YouTube video? I don't really know. We're not judging it. It just is what it is. You know, I'm here today. I'm in Sydney. I'm in a hotel. And I just wanted to turn the camera on and just have a bit of a chat because this is kind of something that I'm still dealing with, although it's gotten 1,000 times better than what it was about a year or two ago, a little over a year ago. And yeah, I just felt like turning the camera on, picking up the microphone and just having a bit of a chat. And honestly, I know it sounds corny, but my goal really is if I can help one person not make the same mistakes that I've made, because as I'll go through in today's episode, I've made a lot of mistakes when it comes to sleep and I've learned a ton. And if I can just help one person not make the mistakes that I've made, because they're really easy mistakes to avoid once you know them, then that's going to be a huge W for me. I'm going to call that a massive win. With that being said, I feel like to really paint the picture of my sleep issues and so I can help you the most is kind of give you a bit of a background as to like my history of sleep issues, if that kind of makes sense. Because maybe if you're watching this or you're listening to this, you'll be able to relate to this. So growing up, I was never a really like a good sleeper. You know, the sort of people, they just sleep, man. Fuck those people. No, I'm just joking. But they are just the sort of people that they can sleep through anything, they sleep in. And you know, when I was a kid, I remember this so clearly. I remember always whenever I went to a sleepover, I would wake up first, no matter what time we went to bed. And as we were kids, we stayed up late, we were playing video games, we were being silly, but no matter what time we went to bed, whether it be 10 o'clock or midnight or whatever, I would always wake up at 5 a.m. I was always the first kid to be awake. And you know when you're the first kid to be awake, you're at someone else's house, you're kind of like wandering around, it's kind of weird. Maybe the parents are up and you're like, hey, like it's just a weird situation. I was always that kid. And that was never really an issue. It just was what it was. I just remember that really clearly. I was just never like a really sleep through anything, always sleep in kind of kid. I've always been an early riser. And as I kind of got older, you know, that theme always sort of stayed true to me, which I believe to be highly genetic, by the way. I think that the way that we sleep, whether we're super early people, whether we're morning people, or whether we're like night owls, I believe there are about 4 different chronotypes when it comes to sleep. I believe that to be highly genetic. You know, if you were to just look at my family, my mum and my dad, my mum in particular is a really short sleeper, early riser. Both of them are early risers. So it does make sense that I've got the same thing. But then, you know, getting into, you know, when I was a teenager and when I was sort of in my early 20s, that theme sort of stayed true. I was never like a great sleeper, but it also wasn't really an issue for me. Like I didn't really think about it. It just was. I didn't feel shitty. I didn't like wake up feeling tired. I was just a short sleeper. And that was kind of as far as that really got, which was fine. But then I sort of, once I started getting into, as I was a bit older, started getting into health and fitness a little bit more. I started getting into personal training and coaching, and then the obvious, sleep becomes a really obvious thing to start looking at and start learning about. You start understanding just how important sleep is. It's the elixir of life, right? And that was when I really started looking into sleep in a little bit of a deeper sense. I started researching it a little bit more, and that's when I came across this book, Why We Sleep. Basically, anyone who's read the book Why We Sleep understands that the message is pretty clear. And the message is, the shorter you sleep, the shorter you live. Like if there was one message that I could take away from that book, it's that. If you don't get 8 hours of sleep, you will die early. And that's what I took from that. And I started looking at myself and I started going, well, fuck shit. Like, I don't sleep 8 hours. I maybe get 6 hours, 6.5 hours, sometimes 7, but I wasn't sort of sure, back then I wasn't tracking my sleep. Back then I wasn't doing it. I wasn't really thinking about it. I just know I slept shorter than most people. And that's when I had the grand idea to get myself an Oura ring and start tracking my sleep. And again, just to go on a little side tangent here, I don't think tracking your sleep is bad. I just want to say that. I don't think tracking your sleep is bad. I don't think that for most people, just like for most people, I think that jumping on the scales every day would be a net positive. They've shown that in studies that just by the mere fact of just jumping on the scales in the morning every single day, we're likely to lose weight or at least maintain our weight, because what we measure, we manage. We understand whether or not we're going backwards, whether or not we're eating too much, just by simply jumping on the scales every day and by seeing whether or not the number's staying the same, going up or going down. It's really that simple. For most people, that's not an issue. Now, there is always going to be someone on the other side of the bell curve that jumping on the scales every day is not going to be the best for. Maybe it really messes their day up when they see the number just jump up a little bit. Maybe they've got a history of an eating disorder. Maybe you know what I'm saying? But that's not the majority of people. And to say that most people shouldn't just jump on the scales, that's a blanket statement. And I don't think that is true. I think there's just always extremes on either end of the scales. I think the same is with sleep tracking. Most people would probably benefit from being more aware of whether or not their sleeping habits are good for them, whether or not they're getting enough good quality sleep, whether or not banging 10 coffees a day and the last one being at 6 o'clock at night, whether or not that's actually good for them, whether or not, I think in my own personal experience that from what I've seen from most people and most people that I've coached, that tracking your sleep is probably going to be a net positive. Now, for me, I fell on the other side of the bell curve. I got obsessive. For me, what I saw, all it gave me was the confirmation that I'm not getting enough sleep. I started wearing the Oura ring. All I was seeing was 6 hours, 6.5 hours. Maybe once every few weeks I'd get a 7, but that was on a really, really, really good night. And I'd link that back to the book, Why We Sleep. The shorter you sleep, the shorter you live. So I got obsessive. Man, that became a 3 to 4 year journey of just trying to get 8 hours of sleep. I tried everything, and anyone who's dealt with sort of sleep issues, that they know that the harder you try, the more elusive it becomes, right? It's like anything. It's like, don't think about the fucking elephant in the room. You think about the elephant in the room. It's like, if you try really hard with sleep, it tends to go the other way, at least in my experience. And that's what kept happening. So I kept trying. I dived deeper into sleep. I started learning more about, what the right habits and the right routines are and the right supplements and everything that you could possibly do. No matter what I did, 6 hours, 6.5 hours, maybe 7. But at some point, it was no longer just 6 hours. It was no longer just 6.5 hours. I started seeing 5 hours, 5.5 hours, 4 hours, 3.5 hours. And that's when, for me, it started snowballing in the wrong direction. Now, I'm really kind of like overgeneralizing here, and I am skimming over a large portion of time. It really was death by 1,000 cuts. It didn't happen overnight. It was just a slow, steady process of every day checking my Oura ring, checking my sleep. And continually getting that negative reinforcement that you are not getting enough sleep, therefore you're going to die early. That's what I was taking from this. And the other thing when it comes to tracking your sleep is you kind of, like I said earlier in today's video, I spent my whole life sleeping 6.5 hours, 7 hours, maybe. And I never felt tired. I never felt like I needed more sleep, only once I started tracking my sleep, because I was getting confirmation that I'm not sleeping enough. So I'd wake up when in another parallel universe, if I never got that Oura ring, I probably would have felt fine. But what I saw was a score that wasn't very high. And it would tell me, oh, you haven't got enough sleep. Maybe take a little bit more rest today. And it was setting me up for a bad day. And I've seen this a lot with people tracking their sleep. Again, not everyone. Most people will be fine, but there are a certain subset of people, whether or not it's a personality type. I'm a big data-driven person. I like to win. I want to make things better. And I think for me, in my personality type and people like me, I think that's where tracking your sleep can become a net negative. And so that's what happened. I kept seeing 5 hours. I kept seeing, 4 hours and then the odd 3. And it really did snowball in the wrong direction to the point where it was just so hard for me to get a good night's sleep. And I developed a really, really bad relationship with sleep. I was dreading going to bed. It became something that I really didn't look forward to. I would tell myself going into bed, I'm like, fuck, it's going to be another shit night, I would wake up at 2 a.m. and no matter what I did, wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. And this just became such a consistent thing that I eventually had to move out of my bedroom, with my wife, Bree. Like, it was like I could no longer sleep in there because it started with I'd wake up at 2 a.m., feel wide awake, move to the next bedroom, try and sleep over there, do whatever I could, put the binaural beats on, do the meditation, do the, watch a show, try and take my mind off it, do a bit of reading, whatever I could do to try and get back to sleep. But like none of it fucking worked because I'd wake up and my first thought was, fuck, I'm awake again. Instantly cortisol, adrenaline flowing through my system. And so what started as me eventually, what started as me just waking up and then just going to the next room started with me just going to the next room. Because I knew that it was going to be a shit night. I knew I was keeping Brie awake by just continually tossing and turning and tossing and turning. And anyone knows that you can feel the other person's energy. I was just keeping her awake by my bad energy. So that in itself wasn't great, I think it was over a year where I slept in the second room, which is not great for a relationship. And so there was a lot of things outside of my sleep that started really getting affected by my poor sleep. At some point, my health really started to deteriorate, as you can imagine. I was getting way more bad sleeps than good. My psoriasis was getting much, much worse. My anxiety was getting really bad. I remember having a panic attack when I was just getting a haircut. I remember having a panic attack while I was drinking with the boys. I ended up in hospital a couple of times because I thought my heart palpitations were heart attacks. And long story short, my health was really, I could see myself aging. Like I would look in the mirror and I'm like, holy fucking shit, dude. Like you look so old. And it really became one of those things. Like, I'm not an idiot here. Like people knew me as the sleep guy. Like when I was coaching clients, I was really good at getting other people to sleep great because I knew a lot about it. I dealt with it for a long time. I'd gone so deep on the research. I knew how to get other people to sleep great. And I felt like such a fucking fraud not being able to sleep myself. And again, it's not like I didn't know what I was doing. It's like I was doing everything that you're supposed to be doing when it comes to getting a good night's sleep, all the good habits, all the good routines, all the supplements, doing, not making sure not to have caffeine anywhere near bed, cutting caffeine out altogether. Everything. I tried everything and nothing worked. And at the point where you start getting heart palpitations and panic attacks and anxiety, and you start seeing yourself age purely because you're not sleeping enough, but yet you're doing all of the right things, that's a hopeless feeling. Like that's a feeling of like, well, what the fuck else? And again, that monster of like, you're going to die early just kept growing, just kept growing, just kept growing. For me, it got to a real low point. There was one night where I'm like, I need to get a good night's sleep tonight. Like it has to happen. And I remember doing everything that day in order, like everything I did that day was in order to sleep good that night. Every single thing that you're supposed to do, I did. To the point where it was like I had my mattress that's usually in the spare bedroom out in the lounge room because I'm like, new environment, I'll try something new. We had a better air conditioner out there. I'm going to make sure that the temperature is exactly 18 degrees like it says to do. I remember making sure not to get any light in my eyes after dark. Made sure to wear the blue light blocking glasses. The lights were all red in the house. I even read somewhere, I can't even remember where I read this. I read somewhere that having plants in your bedroom can help with sleep. I didn't know whether it was true. I would have tried anything at this point. So I had the fucking house plants around my mattress in the lounge room, sitting underneath the air conditioner in red lights with my blue light blocking glasses on, doing anything I could just to get a good night's sleep. And lo and behold, I couldn't sleep. Couldn't fall asleep. Hours passed. And I remember just fucking yelling out, just going like, fuck. And I just broke down. Like I just fully broke down. I just felt so fucking hopeless. I'm like, I've tried everything right. Like I've done everything right. I've tried everything at this point and none of it works. And that was when I just felt like completely defeated. I was anxious. I was becoming depressed. At that point, I felt like a year had gone by and I'd accomplished nothing. Nothing, because I couldn't work. I couldn't work longer. I couldn't concentrate. I could hardly train. I was overweight. I didn't feel like eating good. I was eating like shit. I was partying again because I just wanted to fucking I just couldn't deal with it. And it wasn't long after that night that I watched a video by Alex Hormozi. And this is one of those situations where it was just the right message that I needed to hear at the right time by the right person. And it was a video that he did on sleep. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll watch anything on sleep at this point. And he was the first person that I'd heard talk about sleep, not in the realm of here's what habit you should do, here's the proper routine that you should do, here's the supplements that you should take, all of the stuff that you usually you need to get 8 hours of sleep, all of these things that you usually hear from the sleep gurus or the whatever. He was the first person that I'd heard say, maybe you don't need 8 hours of sleep. Maybe you're okay with 6 hours. Maybe you're okay with 7 hours. And not to put sleep on a pedestal. Not to get... like, he had to do the same thing. He had to stop tracking his sleep. And to not use the language around sleep like shoulds and must-haves. Like, I need to have this in order to get a good night's sleep. Basically, everything that I was doing, he said not to do. And it was the first time that it really clicked for me that I was the problem. That I was the one creating all of this. It wasn't my genetics, although they play a part. That wasn't the reason. I'd spent most of my life, yes, sleeping shorter, but I felt fine. It wasn't my house. You know, I remember thinking, you know, at a point we were living in an apartment and the house, you know, our bedroom was right next to where the lift is and there's a lot of electrical systems through there. I remember thinking maybe it's the electrical system, like just putting the blame outwards. It's when I realized that it was all my fucking fault. All of it. I had done this. I had become so obsessive around getting 8 hours of sleep. I'd put so many should, must have beliefs in place in order to get a good night's sleep that I completely fucked myself. And it was that moment that I realized that I'd done it myself that I just said, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to stop everything. I'm going to stop the habits. I'm going to stop the routines. I'm going to stop taking supplements. I'm going to stop wearing blue light blocking glasses. I did almost the complete opposite. I started watching TV right up until bedtime. I started using my phone in bed again. I started doing all of the bad habits that you're not supposed to do. And you know what happened? I had the best fucking sleep of my entire life that night. The best fucking... I'll never forget it. I slept like a fucking baby. And ever since then, that was the big realization for me that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how hard you try. It doesn't matter if you're doing all of the right things, taking all of the supplements, all of that stuff, right? If you develop an anxiety around going to sleep, and this is really for anything as well. This isn't just for sleep, but this is just in my experience. If you develop an anxiety around sleep, the mind is so fucking powerful that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you're taking, what you're doing, if you're doing all of the right things. If you develop language around bed and you tell yourself that I need to do X in order to get a good night's sleep, then you are fucked. Take it from me. You're fucked. Sometimes less is more when it comes to sleep. And since that night, that was about a year and a half ago now, although I still deal with sleep issues, I've never slept better since that night. And some nights I feel those feelings coming back in. I feel myself getting a little obsessive again, and I catch myself, and then I just let go again. And yes, I gave up all the habits and the routines initially. I had to distance myself as much as possible from the beliefs and the lifestyle that I'd built around sleep. And I eventually ended up bringing some of those things back in, obviously. Like I wasn't just an idiot and just would intentionally sabotage my sleep. No, I still know that there are things that you can do that give you the best chance at a good night's sleep. And I eventually brought those back in, but it was a process for sure. Like it wasn't an overnight thing. I had to slowly but surely bring those things back in. I stopped tracking. I stopped doing everything. I just gave up everything. And, eventually I did start tracking my sleep again. But I have a very different relationship with that now. I never allow myself to look at my Oura Ring first thing. I always self-analyze how I feel before I look at my Oura Ring. I make my own decision. How do I feel? Do I feel well rested? Do I feel like I got a good night's sleep? Before I let some outside thing tell me that I didn't get a good night's sleep. And I don't feel obsessive with it at all. I feel like I can just look at it and go like, is what it is. And the biggest takeaway for me after this whole experience was how powerful the mind is. Like the mind is so fucking powerful when it comes to stuff like this. Like you cannot, like I'll say it again, you cannot out-supplement the mind. If you've developed anxiety around bed, I encourage you to please try and back off and become less obsessive. The second thing that I realized is that 8 hours of sleep is an average. When everyone says you need to get 8 hours of sleep, that is an average. There's going to be some people that need less than that. There's going to be some people that need more than that. And I fall on the less side of that. I feel fucking amazing with 7 hours of sleep. But most nights I get 6.5. And that's okay. That's okay. When you've dealt with sleep insomnia to the degree that I have, anything now is a fucking bonus. Truly. Like I'm truly grateful for the nights when I get good night's sleep now. And even when I get not so great night's sleep, I'm still grateful. Because it'll never get as bad as it was a couple of years ago. And the last thing is that sometimes less is more. In the world of self-improvement, in the world of personal development, in the world of health and fitness, there is a lot of people, and then there's just like a lot of things that you can do. Habits, routines, diets, biohacking, technology you can buy, tracking, all of these different things that you can do. When in reality, sometimes just stripping it back and just doing less is way more. So all of that to say that, I still deal with sleep issues. I recently went through a sort of week of bad night's sleep and it is what it is. I don't think I'll ever be like an amazing sleeper. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I don't think that's the card I've been dealt. It was never the card I was dealt as a kid, and I don't think it's going to be the card I'm dealt now. That's just, it is what it is. Some people have things much worse than that. But, I still deal with it to this day. I try my very hardest to not become obsessive with it. I try my very hardest to not let those obsessive thoughts creep back in, which they do sometimes. But all in all, I have a much better relationship with sleep now. And, that was it really. If you are someone who deals with sleep issues, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to help. And all I can say is that if you're feeling those feelings of anxiety around going to bed, if you're feeling anxious around going to sleep, I do urge you to try do less. Do less. Think about it less. Take less supplements. do less routines, just don't track your sleep, care less, and just see what happens. You know, everyone's different. This is just my experience. I can only talk about my experience, but in my experience, I've found that by relinquishing control, the thing that we're trying to get so hard becomes back in our grasp. So anyways, I hope this helps, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.